this year's election might come down to one question. Former President Trump posted it to his social media asking, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And more Republicans have been asking the same exact thing. Take a look.
People look around and they say, am I better off now than I was 4 years ago? The answer to that is no.
Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? And the answer is clearly no for all of American families.
Now, President Biden responded to the question with his own video. It showed empty store shelves from the pandemic, Trump talking about disinfectant from the White House, and more craziness from that time. Now, this has brought up an interesting debate. In DBL Nation, we always want to hear from you. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? Go to dblvote.com to weigh in, and let's try and strip it from pro-Biden, pro-Trump, and honestly ask the question, were you better off 4 years ago than you were today, Jeff?
This is such a great question because everyone's going to have such different answers on how they view the world.
I'm really curious to see what people are going to say.
Yeah, so this is a great question. And for me, I'm going to be real honest and watch how I say some things here. But for me, 4 years ago was a different world.
Yeah.
Different world for me socially, different world in my work life. I came to a point 4 years ago, and I understand things had to change with Me Too and BLM and all those. I understand that. We learned a good lesson from it. But what came out of that was every time I express an opinion or try to pat myself on the back, you're white privilege and you're ahead of everybody and you're a Trumper and you're homophobic on everything that I say that you disagree with, on everything. And it's gotten to a point where it's beyond crazy. The wokeness level that we've reached, and I know people don't like that term either, that we're trying to identify with people who molest children as minor attracted persons. It's gotten real crazy. And I understand that there are going to be comments pouring in while I'm talking right now, but I'm just over that point. I worked with a different media outlet that cut ties with me that I had a great relationship with, and they severed all ties with me because of things I said 15 years ago. And that was family. That hurt me, and I haven't heard from them since. And there's just a lot of things out there. I get auditions right now, and again, I'm being very honest, not angry. I get auditions that say, no white people. But my agent calls me and tells me to come out for this. Why would I waste my time going out with that when I know you're not going to hire a white person? There's not white people in commercials, and that's my second income. Again, boo-hoo, Jeff. I get all the comments that you guys are going to write, but I'm giving you my honest opinion of how I feel in the last 4 years.
So no, you're not better off.
Just in that direct aspect. We could take this in so many different things, and I don't want to make it political. Yes.
Right. Erica?
I would say I'm not, and I think if you look at the social angle of it, or because I mean, for everything, it's almost like for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So obviously 4 years ago, we're talking April 2020. Most of us, I remember just being very unable to breathe for quite a long time because every time the phone rang, it was to deliver some really terrible, tragic news. Also, we hadn't started the social justice movement yet. That came during the summer, but it really emboldened a lot of us to speak out on the things that we believed, even if we didn't have the historical support in which to do so. So I think it's like, now looking back on it, I feel a better sense of being able to breathe at this point. But also, like for my household, I would say 4 years ago was probably a little bit more, it was more fiscally promising than maybe this year.
Socially, you are better off now. Fiscally, you were better off then.
Right, but also my household is an oil and gas household, so I'm just going to be very honest about that.
Okay. Albert.
For me, really quickly, honestly, absolutely yes. My kids are in another state, so the idea of getting on a plane then was not an option. So I was driving 17 and a half hours one way to LA and back. And on the way back, one time I pulled over and had what would be the equivalent of a nervous breakdown. Trump was the president. He was telling people, I'm not making this political, I'm saying what the man said. Yeah. He's talking about, UV light, and it seemed like the person in charge had no idea what they were doing. And I was like, is this going to be my life? Am I going to see my kids twice a year? Am I going to talk to my co-host through Zoom for the rest of my life? We have to remember, we didn't see a way out for a long time. And now that I can do this and talk to you, it means a lot more to me because it was just me and Tori and a couple others in the studio for almost a year. So I had a different perspective. What about you, Sammy?
Really quickly, financially, we were better off 4 years ago, I'll be honest, but I do blame that more on price gouging. So more corporations. It doesn't mean our administration couldn't develop legislation to penalize such corporations. As far as I look at a lot of my friends in states where Roe v. Wade has impacted them, and it's affecting their IVF journeys, it is affecting whether or not they can make any choice for their own body, and they are not happy. And if I lived in one of those states, I would not be happy. So I do think it depends on your own personal experience. Let's see what our viewers say. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? 56% of you say yes.
Close.
44% of you say no. Thank you for voting.